Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, global populations on Fisher here. Right. For the longest time, archaeologists have had, and the scientific community, have had things pretty easy. They've been able to insert their ideas into nice, neat little boxes, whilst at the same time making shit up every now and again, and keeping it maintained. So whenever something comes along that kind of screws things up for them, they get a bit antsy. Understandable, really, when there's so much money to be made from what they do. So many books written, so many reputations built. So when discoveries come along that kind of mess with those timelines, it's not good for them. So, what am I talking about? There's been many events in world history, particularly in the ancient world, and not just events, but myths, shall we say, that have persisted despite the best efforts of those in charge to try and sort of quell them or get them further seen as evidence of just allegory and metaphor. So when discoveries are made that not only prove that those myths are in fact very likely a reality, but also push back the timeline for human civilization and other little things back further and further in time, they don't like that either. One of the most famous examples is the discovery of Troy, which was the focal point of the war in Greek mythology. It's actually a part of Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. And it was found in Turkey, in Anatolia in Turkey, during the 1920s. Now, for a very long time, this was considered a myth and wasn't real. So when they discovered Troy, it was a bit of a shock. And it confirmed a lot that there was actually a war between the Greeks and this mythical city called Troy. That it was a very powerful sort of naval and mercantile city and civilization. That everything written and told by Homer was very likely true. The Trojan War side of things, shall we say. The Odyssey was a bit floaty even for them after that. But over time we started to discover that maybe the events in that second half of the Iliad was actually true. Golden Fleece from Jason and the Argonauts. They found the city where that came from. Have a guess where that was? They don't like talking about that either. The Minotaur. Again, Minoans. Something they didn't want to admit there either, and especially when they started seeing the construction methods and the stuff that they built. AAA buildings. No, they're supposed to only be living in huts. No, they weren't. No, they weren't. It seems to be the more deeply you look into history, the more you begin to find technological advances that should never have been. And this is especially true across Europe, when you start going across Europe, pan-European. If you watch the first series and the second series of this Epics Wars in maybe Alien Tech, you'll know full well what I've been discovering. And it's not just the errata, although they were a big part of the mess that we're in now, I truly believe. But I started tracking them back, because in order to learn as much as you can about a particular civilization, you need to trace them back you need to trace back their ancestry. Where did they come from? And with the errata, it started turning into a hunt across Europe, pretty much, tracking all the way back to Doggerland. And they travelled all the way across Europe. It's now becoming a firm belief that when errata collapsed, the remnants spread out everywhere. Some of them stayed where they were, but the rest of them spread out all over the place, and they likely seeded a great many of the Mediterranean coast civilizations, the Middle East, Egypt, Sumer, likely the Vedic cultures of India on their way across the steppe towards Afghanistan, where they ended up stopping there and formed into the Scythians, who then came back to the Black Sea. But before that, there was another exodus, and this was from Doggerland, and I've mentioned this before. There was 3 sections that went off, as far as I can tell. One that went through France and Belgium and followed it round towards the Black Sea area that way. And then one that went north and around the Scandinavian countries, all the way around, and then down to the Black Sea as well. And then some that spread out into the UK. Now, the ones that spread out into the UK were wiped out by the tidal wave that eventually sank the rest of Doggerland around 8,000 years ago. And this was caused by an undersea landslide that basically came off the coast of Norway. And we know this because we found traces of it all the way across Scotland, the northeast of UK, southeastern Scotland, and it just drowned the whole area down that way and wiped straight across there and into the Irish Channel, Irish Sea.
child and raise her free from care, free from the darkness.
Now, it's very likely this tidal wave was what eventually joined up the rest of the Irish Sea, basically, where the Giant's Causeway is in Wales. That actually connects up to I think it's Belfast, somewhere around that coastal area anyway. But the eastern coast of Ireland, it was actually split into two separate seas. And what that tidal wave did was washed a load of water into it then, and then filled that up and joined them up. Like it did with the English Channel, and just completely buried what was then the island of Doggerland. And that wipes out the actual Doggerlandians that were there. Well, I say wipe them out. There was still a remnant left, and these people are what make up the Irish legends of the Fomorians. Now, if you don't know who the Fomorians are, they were essentially a race of giant sort of demonic beings, as they saw them. Their leader carried a weapon that created lightning, and he could command lightning with this weapon that he had. Does that sound familiar? You see, this is one thing, right, that for some reason academics can't see. Yeah, they treat everything separately. Yeah, they try and put everything into a little box and keep it in that little box, and try not to let it spill out anywhere else. Yeah. So if there's anything that comes along that may indicate a connection to something else, yeah, they sort of trim it off, yeah, and keep it in that little sort of cake box. And it's these little similarities, right, between Thor, yeah, from Norse mythology, obviously, and the Fomorian leader, whose name escapes me. It's these little things that they don't like, yeah. It's the same with take Odin, yeah. Odin is a prime example. Believe it or not, Odin is seen as an outlier, right? Supposedly, by a great many academics, right? But he does have similarities and eerie similarities with a great many of the gods of ancient cultures. Yeah. He's also very, very misunderstood, right? The reason being is because Odin is seen as more priestly and more knowledge focused than his warrior brethren and his warrior children. Yeah, like Thor. Thor is seen as a warrior more than anything else. He's along with being a god of thunder, he also started off as a god of war, right? But Odin's always been very sort of obsessed in a way with knowledge. Yeah, one of the first stories you hear about Odin is he's trying to impress a seer that lives at the bottom of the world tree, right, at the roots. And in order to get his attention, yeah, this seer at the bottom of the world tree's attention, guarding the pool of knowledge, right? He hangs himself from a branch of the world tree so he'll notice him. He sacrifices himself. This also ties into the crucifixion as well. That's another side to this as well. When he gets noticed, he goes down to the pool and the seer says you need to make a sacrifice of some kind to get the pool to accept you and to give you the knowledge. So he takes out his eye and offers it to the pool. And that's enough. It gives him universal wisdom. So Odin, therefore, is portrayed as a man. Now, this is very important, right? He's portrayed as a mortal first. Yeah, when he hangs himself from the world tree to get himself noticed, it's to bring him to the brink of death, right? So he can then transport himself to the roots of the world tree. Yeah, this has eerie connotations between a great many of the other gods, right? Hermes, yeah, Hermes Trismegistus, yeah, or Hermes in general in Greek mythology is tied to Thoth. Yeah, both of them were the same thing. Thoth was a man. He was a king at first of the Chemites, right? And he was initiated into the mysteries, yeah, by a being called the Dweller in the halls of Amenti, which are basically a underworld, if you will. Right? He had to travel to the underworld to get this knowledge. But again, importantly, he started off as a man. Same with Hermes. Hermes is the same. Hermes and Thoth are the same. Hermes and Thoth are the same person, right? Mercury. Now, Mercury is, although is sort of universally accepted as being the Roman version of Hermes, he does have a slightly different story. Again, started off as a man. And in order to, he was basically a trickster. So this is why he's also tied in with Lucifer as well in Christian and biblical mythology. Yeah, he started off as a trickster, always playing pranks on people. One day, he annoyed the wrong person and he beat him to death. So, and Jupiter loved him. Jupiter thought it was amazing. Yeah, absolutely loved him. He kept showing him favour every time he did pranks because it amused him. Yeah, it amused him to see the suffering of others. Right. On the news of his death, and realising it was just about to be taken to the underworld, Jupiter scooped him up and deified him. Yeah, turned him into his messenger, his herald, made him immortal. Again, this is a common theme that he has with Thoth. Yeah, Thoth's deeds were the knowledge that he had, the teaching, writing, and wisdom, and everything else to humanity, along with alchemy. The gods saw favour on him and basically made him immortal. Again, immortality, deification. The same thing happens with another god in Sumer. It's basically the Sumerian version of Orion, who is a hunter. He was a giant called Spasiana, or the Sea Strider, as he's known. Because of his immense size, he was able to basically go across an ocean in one step. Yeah. Now, during the deluge, Vespasiano was killed. He drowned, rescuing the royal family of Anu's favourite city. Yeah. So to show his gratification, he basically took him into the stars and made it, like, deified him and made him a constellation in the sky. Yeah, that's what happened with Vespasiano. Odin is the same. Odin, from that day forward, after he gained the knowledge of the pool of knowledge from under the world tree, he then became immortal, and he started to teach the rest of mankind, going all the way around. He was basically the first priest. Yeah, he was quite. I suppose you could call him a paladin in some way, shape, or form, right? So again, that's another connection. Now, so with Thor and the Fomorian leader, you can see where that connection actually ties in. Norse mythology, right, and the old Celtic sort of mythologies are very, very, very closely tied together. I'd say that they're probably some of the oldest sort of mythologies about our gods that we have. Yeah, older than a lot of academics basically give them credit for. The reason I say that is you can find very deep ties, right, between the Celtic and Norse to the Greek, yeah, the Orphic Greek and the Roman, yeah, and the Greek influence on the Egyptians started way before Alexander, yeah. Same with the Greek influence on the biblical text and the Hebrew mythologies, yeah, religious mythologies, and all the Abrahamic religions that stem from that. They have very, very deep ties to the Greek. Yeah. So once you accept that those came from the Greeks, and then you can then see that they came from the Celtic and the Norse, and from those also came the Slavic. Now, the Slavic mythologies are all based on the errata, right? Same with the Sumerian myths. Essentially, all our gods, yeah, all our pantheon of gods in the ancient world are all based on real people. And it's where these real people came from that has been a journey. Let's put it that way. It really has. This started off where I'm going with this, and where this series of Epics Wars in maybe Alien Tech will be going. This started off with something that I saw about sea peoples that basically collapsed the Bronze Age. And all the civilizations during that Bronze Age ended up collapsing because of this group called the Sea Peoples that everyone sort of associates with the Phoenicians. The thing is, the one thing that they don't tell you is that the Egyptians, the Byzantines, basically every single culture that came into contact with these Sea Peoples, they all say they came from the north and west, yeah, in the Mediterranean. Which means that they had to come through the gates of Hercules. They never came from the east, which is where the Phoenicians would have come from. Yeah? It was from the west and from the north. They were blonde, blue-eyed. That's what a great many of them say. So of course, then people start to associate them with the early Norse sort of cultures, and in some ways, yeah, I could see that. But I don't believe that's true either. You see, the further you go back and the further you start tracking back, you start to see the same sort of characteristics that the Sea Peoples had with something that in early British and Scandinavian and even Icelandic myths called the Northmen. These were a race of very vicious and violent seafaring culture that came literally from the north, and no one knew where they came from. But historians and academics keep trying to keep pushing them further and further north, yeah, as they go. Now it's a wide belief at the moment that they came from Iceland, after people have been tracking them back from tales in the Orkneys, depictions of them coming from the north, and this is before the Vikings ever existed, right? Let's just get this straight. These are very, very, very old legends about the Northmen, the men from the north that came and took the women and children away, whilst just completely demolishing whole towns and whole cities. So the first tales that I could find were, like I said, from northern Scotland and the Orkneys. So immediately I started thinking Doggerland. Okay, yeah, but hold on, they said they came from the north. So where else do we see them? I thought to myself. So I start going back a bit further. And when everyone started thinking, like when you start looking at the early Scandinavian cultures, you start seeing that they even talk about the Northmen. Going back further and further and further. Okay. So where the hell do they come from then? You see, they always come from the sea, which is strange. Okay. So you travel back further and further and further, and eventually you find the same sort of mythologies in Iceland, in Icelandic myth. And this is where, in a strange sort of way, it broadens out. Now, a lot of academics, they associate the Northmen with, like I said, Iceland. In fact, there's a game that's out at the moment called Hellblade 2, which is based on all this ancient Celtic and ancient Norse myth, and they talk about the Northmen in that. They were always associated with giants, something to do with giants. They were either giants themselves, or they were working with the giants, humans that worked with the giants, or lived alongside them in some way. Now, just like academics do, they have to follow sort of the more academic historical route, so they firmly implant them into the Icelandic landscape, yeah. But even the Icelandics, their mythologies talk about the Northmen coming from the north, but coming from the northeast. So that made me think, if they're even talking about the Northmen, and the Northmen are an even older culture, could this be the precursor to the errata? And, well, the ancient, very ancient, like ancestors of the errata, but also the ancestors of the Doggerlandians. And that's where similarities became very apparent. I started making lots of connections. And then Thumper, God bless you, Mum. God bless you. He showed me something that blew me away. And that opened up even more of a rabbit hole. But we'll get to that next time. Like, share, subscribe. You know the drill. I'll see you later.